Hello and welcome to CHIASPORA, the show where we interview those who left Chicago, but Chicago never left them. Today we have a very special guest. He has a podcast all about baseball and entertainment, all mixed in, called Peanuts, Popcorn, and Crackerjacks. You will also know him because his father was one of the greats in Chicago sports, the late great Ron Santo, and Hall of Famer. This here is Jeff Santo. Welcome to CHIASPORA, dude.
Great to be here, Mark.
So there's a Geno's East out here in Sherman Oaks, as you know, which I think you go to once in a while. Mm-hmm. And I was telling the owner about, I was like, yeah, I got the Chicago thing. He's like, you really should talk to Jeff. I'm like, Jeff who? And then he said your last name. And I said, is that really his son? And then I went deep dive. And I was like, okay, I did not even know you were a filmmaker. I had no idea all of that. It should have made sense because this whole club was your film. Mm-hmm. So in case you've slept under some sort of rock, Ron Santo, when he was alive, a documentary was created by this man right here. And it's an amazing documentary of a lot of Chicago celebrities speaking on behalf of Ron's story. And I'm just so happy that I discovered that you did this. And you have an amazing podcast where you have interviewed a number of Chicagoans, amongst other people. You should tell people a little bit about the podcast and who you've had on.
Yeah, well, we'll start at Geno's. They're a sponsor of my podcast.
Oh, yeah. No, I know. I hear that.
There you go. So I'm in there a lot. Yeah, obviously love the food. Our podcast, we're on our second season. And I started off like really going back to the golden era of baseball when my dad played. And a lot of times, you don't see many interviews on these guys and what they had to play through versus today. Yeah, way different, right? I mean, those guys were blue collar guys. They
didn't even have a draft at that time.
No, well, when my dad signed with the Cubs, they did not have the draft then. That started in I think '65. I think Rick Monday was the first guy to get drafted. But yeah, so how they made it and the circumstances they played under, they were part of middle class society. Now it's pretty much they're not a part of it anymore, I know. My dad parked across the street from Wrigley Field at Vince's gas station, So my brother and I were a big part of that, going to the games with them every summer. We grew up in the clubhouse at Wrigley Field. On Wrigley Field, it was like our playground. It's amazing. So I just wanted to go back to my childhood and talk about the people I met during that time because there's a window as a ball player, and you don't realize it as a kid. You grow up into it. You're born into it, like my brother and I were, and my parents had us young, so we were able to experience that lifestyle to the fullest. And you don't know any differently about your life. I mean, that this is normal. So
when people have their friends, their dad's friends or whatever, yours were like Billy Williams and Ernie Banks. Like that doesn't happen to most people.
Yeah. And you don't think about it while you're in it. You go to school, you go to grade school, you have great school friends, and you don't think they're looking at you any differently, but they are, right? Until your dad walks onto the grade school playground and you see all the kids go, holy cow, there's Ron Santo, right? But, we had a really unique childhood. And that childhood formed me and my brother. Two different personalities too, and I wanted to go back there. I'm 60 years old now, and I just wanted to get back to that kid because when that ended for my dad, it ended for us. So you have this lifestyle of every spring you go to spring training as a family. There's a new beginning every spring. I mean, that's the special thing about baseball. It starts over again, right? Yeah. And you're optimistic about, this is going to be the year.
That's what the Cubs always said. Always next year.
And so we lived in that lifestyle. So it was like, okay, here comes spring. We're going off. We're going to leave school for a month. My brother and I are going to be tutored down in Arizona. We're going to hang out at the ballpark with all the guys. That's our life. And then when it ends, you're like, wait a second, where'd that life go? And
it's a weird shame.
It really is. And not enough people understand that. And I don't think I understood it until later. Like, wow, that was a tough transition. And then, it's just so many things. Like, I thought I was going to be a ball player, right? Because you're around all these greats. You're like, hey, well, I'm going to be like this. I grew up into it. But you don't realize there's a different aspect to that as far as like the mental side of what those guys had to endure to become who they became.
Yeah.
Okay. Especially my dad.
Blue collar. That's the thing. Chicago was blue collar town, but baseball at the time was even very blue collar. I mean, people were going obviously to war before his time. Like it wasn't a normal. The salaries were not the same.
Yeah. And they're 1-year contracts. So it was a time where they had to negotiate their own 1-year contract. They didn't have agents. So my dad would have to go into the, the GM's office, John Holland, and say, I want a raise. And he's like, well, and the fight, he would say, every time I would come out of that meeting, I thought I had a horrible year, because he would say, hey, well, you hit into so many double plays, you struck out well, wait a second, I led the league in walks, I led the league in RBIs. You go down that row, and it's a battle, because that's a businessman working with a guy that just, got to this level as hard work, and you can't fight that. So it was always a struggle on that level, but you look back at those times and everything was pure because they fought for their job every year.
I remember in the story when I think he got traded to the Sox. Is that what happened?
Yeah,
it was a big issue, because he definitely did not. It didn't seem like he wanted that.
Well, here's the thing: he was the first one to use the 5-10 rule. So back then, if you were on a team for more than 5 years or in the league for more than 10, you can veto a trade. He was the first one to use it.
So even before, when they actually have like no trade clauses.
Yeah, well, that was before free agency.
Right,
so this is the only thing they really had. So the Cubs came to him after the 1973 season. Here's my dad playing for the Cubs for 14 seasons.
Yeah.
Made it as a 20-year-old.
Gold Glover, everything.
And they now are going to start breaking up that 69 team. And they're like, Ron, we got a deal to send you to California, to the Angels. 2-year contract. You're going to be one of the highest paid ball players in the league. And he said, I'm not packing my family up to go to California. And they're like, oh, hold on. And then they came back and said, wait, we don't want to trade you anymore. He goes, no, you wanted to trade me, so trade me. And this is where my dad's emotions got the best of him. And he goes, trade me to the White Sox. I'll stay in Chicago. And that's how he got traded to the White Sox.
So he chose it a little bit.
He chose it. Yeah, no, he did choose that. And, going to that South Side was a bit of a difference. And they had Bill Melton playing third. So my dad played first, second, DH'd. And it just didn't fit for him. And he was starting to become a businessman at that time and just decided to retire early. He retired at 34.
Wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And he was a diabetic. So I'm sure he could have had more years if he wasn't a diabetic. But that's a story in itself too.
Yeah, if you again watch this old clip, because he talks a little. I mean, obviously we talked about it. A lot of people, a lot of players were talking about how he was like tough as nails, because the whole time he was just dealing with it. He'd eat a candy bar or something like that just to get enough energy, kind of thing. He was like, I think my blood sugar is low. I might as well just have a candy bar. Obviously, it was a different time, and medicine was not as advanced as it is now. But the guy. The reason I think he did so well in Chicago is I feel like Chicagoans really related to just that work ethic. Because from what I remember, he came up as a catcher. Mm-hmm. Like they're like, yeah, we need you to play catcher. He's like, all right, whatever, I'll do it. And then when when they realize this guy can hit pretty well, they're like, all right, we'll put him at third.
My dad's baseball story is one of a kind. I mean, really, I'll take the Pepsi challenge with anyone on stories. I mean, he really is a portrait of a ball player. And we're actually doing a TV series. Bonnie Hunt is attached with us, producing and writing with us.
She was on your show, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
Nice.
And it's quite a story, literally starting with his dad leaving the family at 8 years old. So he was raised by his mom and his sister. And they lived in a small duplex. And right down the block was a minor league ballpark. It was the AAA for the Cincinnati Reds. And it was a stadium called Six Stadium in Seattle, Washington, inner city. And so my dad lived a block from that stadium, and he started working there at 9 years old with his sister doing concessions, and went to grounds crew and then bat boy, and then worked his way up to the elite job of being the clubhouse boy at 17. And so he was a prospect then. So when the Reds came into town, he has a great story where, he's the clubhouse boy. They hear he's a big prospect. They're like, hey, put on a uniform. We want to see you hit out there on the field with us, with the big league team. And so he goes out and he gets suited up. And they get him in the batting cage, the cage over home plate. Yeah. My dad starts kind of hitting these kind of chinker. He's nervous. And the catcher for the Reds said, hey, kid, try my bat. And so my dad's like, he throws him his bat. And my dad said it was like Dick Allen's bat. It weighed like 40 ounces. He goes, I was just popping him up in the cage. And so after the guy looks at him and goes, yeah, kid, that bat separates the boys from the men. And so literally, 2 years later, my dad's in the big leagues, and he's facing the Reds, and he hits a home run, and he crosses home plate, and he looks him in the eye and goes, I'm a man now. And he had no idea what he was saying, right? But this is him. That was my dad, right? Just remembering, balls. Really the guts and the balls, and
I love that story.
And my dad, when he was getting signed, back then they didn't have the draft like you talked about. So every Major League Ball team would come to his duplex. So every team came in one at a time, giving their offers. And so his sister and his stepdad did a lot of research and saw that the Cubs were probably the quickest way to the big leagues. But there was one scout for the Cubs that always came to my dad's games starting as a freshman in high school.
Yeah.
And he had cerebral palsy, just a beautiful man, and knew my dad was a third baseman. But my dad wound up playing in this big all-star game in Seattle, the top players, and they had him catch because the catcher went down, and he filled in for his catcher senior year. And that's how great of an athlete he was. And he was the MVP of that game as a catcher. And he's like, I'm a third baseman, man. And so every team was wanting to sign him as a catcher. And then he turned down all the highest offers and went with the Cubs, even though they signed him as a catcher. But the scout said, Ron, I think we're going to be able to have you play third base, but our top guy wants you to sign as a catcher. And he's like, I'm a third baseman. And so he had to work his way up to show him that he was a third baseman, and he got to the bigs in a year and a half.
There's a story, correct me if I'm wrong, I remember reading this, I don't know if this is how true this is, that at one point, I don't know if it was a Cubs coach or somebody, there's a bunch of people, they brought him out literally into, I think it was Wrigley, they were like in the stands, and the coach is going to each player and going, you're not going to make it, you might as well pack your bags. You're okay, whatever. He goes to Ron. He's like, "You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be a major league hitter. I know this." And the only other person he mentioned was Billy Williams, who were in the same area. And those are the only ones who actually made it. Is that true?
True. Okay. Double-A. That was Rogers Hornsby, one of the greatest hitters of all time, right-handed hitter. And he came down to scout the Double-A team and the prospects, and he lined them all up in the stands and went down and literally was telling people, you go home. You'll never make it. I don't even know how you got here. And he got to, and my dad and Billy were sitting together.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, no, they're coming down. He's coming down to us. He's going to tell me to go home. And Billy and him were nervous. He pointed at Billy and my dad and said, you two, both of you can play in the bigs today. And he was right.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a good story.
It's a great story. And, and another thing with my dad is when he did sign with the Cubs, his mom said, hey, okay, Ron, you got to go get a physical with the family doctor. Because back then, the teams didn't do physicals.
Right,
players, right?
You're outside of it.
And so we found out that he had high levels of sugar in his urine, and then did another test, and he was a type 1 diabetic. And that freaked him out. And the doctor said, I don't know, if you can play ball. I've never had anyone like this. And he said, you're going to need to take insulin. And my dad said, well, I came in here and I didn't have a problem. So until it hits me, I'm going to the big leagues and I'm going to pretend I don't have this. And he goes, well, it's going to hit you because for type 1 diabetics, the life expectancy is 25 years without insulin. So my dad went and ignored it and made it to the bigs. And his second season, he lost 15 pounds, and that's when it hit him. And he goes, oh, no. And he went to my brother's pediatrician, and the pediatrician said, Ron, if you don't walk out of here with insulin, not only is your baseball career over, but you're gonna die. And my dad had to, while he was a big leaguer, learn how to acclimate with taking insulin from day baseball to night games. Yeah. And that's even hard for just a regular guy.
I was going to say, I would even say doubleheaders probably be tough too.
Same thing. So what he found out is that when you exercise, it's like an added insulin.
Yeah.
And so he knew that before he even had to take insulin. So he would always run thinking that was going to
help him out.
Help him out. He would just run all the time. And so then he realized that when he would take a shot of insulin in the morning, he would take it every morning, remember, take it out of the fridge, take it in his stomach, and then go by how he felt. Because they would take one shot, and then they didn't have glucometers, so he would have to do those strips where you would urinate on the strip and see if you're high or low. And then maybe at dinner, if you eat after a game, he might take another shot. That's how he started regulating himself, just all on his own. And didn't tell the Cubs, kept it a secret because he didn't want to get judged until he made his first All-Star game. And then he told the organization. But he did tell the team doctor, Jake Suker, who really helped him out privately. But that was just doing that and being a big leaguer and knowing that this can take you down and end your career, to fight through that and to understand what he was up against and still maintain that discipline, in his head and to not let it eat him up. That's the part where with Blue Collar Famous is the TV series we're doing, where after my dad passed away, I did this old Cub, right? But this story is different because I'm getting into the psychology of my father. And the older you get, it really has helped me understand how he got through all this stuff, because we're similar in personalities, but he's Ron Santo and I'm not, right? So sometimes when I can get upset, it could turn people off, but I'm getting upset because I'm passionate. And for my dad, he could take that on the baseball field and it could work for him, So
And in the booth.
And in the booth too, right? But that's
we all believe we as an audience were like, we all felt the same thing.
Right.
It's definitely different when you're at home with family.
Right. So it's just, he was just the strength he had mentally, psychologically, to have a father that left him, who turned him on to baseball, turned him on to that stadium, and then leave the family and thinking like, oh, he doesn't believe in me. To still believe in yourself as a kid and to be loved by your mother and sister, two females that really raised you.
I want to talk about how
pretty
it all kind of started, because where did you grow up? Where were you born?
I was born at Oak Park Hospital in Chicago. And my first house, my brother lived in Elmwood Park. That's where my dad went to the Italian neighborhood. Had a connection from his cousin, this Italian family, the Matarisis, who took my dad and my mom in. And they've been friends to this day, just a wonderful family. And so, being in Elmwood Park, a lot of those guys, those Italian guys, like my dad being there. They'd stop by, and some of the people that would come over to say hello to him was pretty amazing, like out of The Sopranos, right?
Yeah.
But he was that Italian kid, for the Cubs that the Italian neighborhood really got behind. And, he was like a greaser when he came here. He wore the leather jacket, the T-shirt with his smokes rolled up in his sleeves.
That's so funny.
So he was that kid that you're like, wow, who is this guy, right? And he just fit right into Chicago. That became his home.
And then where did you grow up?
I grew up in Park Ridge.
Okay.
That was the first home that I lived in. And then we moved to Valley Low in Glenview. A little private lake that we lived on. Really cool community. But it was, the homes in the lake were great. And then right behind them, I had some friends that lived in the condominiums and apartments. And so that's where I grew up and went to high school at Glenbrook South.
Gotcha. Oh, yeah. Okay. So you did all the way from...
Oh, yeah.
So I know, because your dad, he married, your parents separated, and then he remarried.
Yes.
Somebody, correct? So how old were you when that happened?
Yeah. So that was the thing that we were talking about. When the baseball ended, then my dad and mom split So
it was after his career.
It was after his career, and that even got worse. That was I didn't realize how tough that was for me, but that happened, and so that's where the change happens, and then you kind of, Dad's not home, but he's always coming over. But I always kind of wish, I look back, like my dad gave me that mental, like, IQ. Like I know baseball inside and out. I got a very high IQ for baseball, but as far as the toughness, because my dad grew up different than us. We had more than he had.
Every generation,
right? But I knew I had that same spirit in me, so I got a little later that fight when I came out here to LA.
You need it out.
You know what I mean? You do. And so, but just to know, like, there's just things on there that you just have to be aware. I think it's working more for sons of ball players today because they're getting more tutelage, mental tutelage. Not only that are they on the field when they're kids, but they're learning from their dads. Their dads have more time to kind of teach them and say, hey, because it's different. If your dad's a ball player and you got talent and you don't become that, it's a different thing on your psyche, because that's all you knew,
So did you play baseball throughout high school?
Oh, yeah, and in college.
Oh, wow. Where'd you go to college?
My first year, I went to the small Division II school down in Florida called St. Leo. Then I transferred and played at Miami, Ohio, Division I.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you did play D1.
I was a good player, man.
Would you play?
I could hit. Unfortunately, I played third base. But my arm kind of was shot. I should have got a surgery, but I was a really good hitter.
So that probably was weird. So like at that time, like you said, you wanted to be a ball player probably since your entire childhood, and you went for it.
I kind of went for it. Like I quit my last year because I got the coach. I had a great high school coach who understood our situation. Didn't favor us, but treated us with respect.
You and your brother, you mean?
Yeah.
I see.
My brother's 2 years older than me.
Okay, but so you went to high school at the same time?
Well, he was a senior and I was a sophomore.
But still,
yeah, absolutely.
Yep, that's really cool.
Yep. And he was a good ball player. Still is to this day. He was a little shorter than me, but he was a beast. And we had talent. It's just, again, the mental part of the game my dad had a lot to fight for. And at that time, I don't think we had the same amount to fight for. And later I did, but if I had that fight like I have, even now at 60. There's a difference there, and I think that's why you're seeing more kids make it, because their dad, they're giving that fight to them. Even the Bankses, they had some talent, but similar to us, you know what I mean? You're separated because those guys have a lot going on, so you learn the game by just being on the field with all the other players and just playing. Yeah.
It's really interesting. So when you were growing up there, obviously you all lived together at one point. When it was happening, did it actually happen where you would have different family members from other teams come over for dinner and so like have you ever seen the movie 61?
Of course.
So the Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle, they would like come to each other's homes and eat dinner. Was it similar to that, or was it not like that?
Oh no, totally. It was that. We actually back then, more than today, we all stayed at the same hotel in Scottsdale, the Ramada Inn. We are all one big family. Like you would go into the diner in the Ramada Inn and you'd see the starting lineup for the Cubs eating breakfast at the diner with regular people. You know what I mean?
That's pretty cool.
And so we were always together, and my dad and mom had parties at our house in Valley Low, so the whole team's over there. I remember one time Billy Williams grabbed grabbed a goose out of the lake and let him go into the house, and the thing just went nuts, just shitting all over the walls So I mean, they would do all, and the Chicago Bears, you'd see, Bob Avellini, Mike Ditka, all those guys. My dad was friends with Brian Piccolo and Gail Sears, and so that was a tight community. Even the Hawks, Bobby Hall. I remember going to a Hawks game with my dad and brother, and we'd sit on the glass, and then Bobby Hall, Dennis Hall, Keith Magnuson all would come by and tap their sticks on the glass, giving respect to the other athletes in Chicago, and so that was our life, and so
It's I'm telling you, it's remarkable. Like again, I don't think it would be like that today at all.
No,
I could be way wrong, but it just seems like you had a pretty normal-ish childhood for somebody who had a very amazing father as an athlete. I could be wrong. You could tell me if I'm wrong. I'm just saying it's like you look at a lot of these athletes and you see their kids. You were saying people look differently. Look at you differently if you're the son of something or a daughter or something. It's just so weird because it's like he wasn't very involved in your life. It seemed like. For you and it was just you and your brother?
Yeah, and my sister was born in '69.
Okay,
so then she came and then she took over. My dad's little girl for sure. We did have a normal life because my mom and dad made it that way. Our house was open. We always had people coming in and out. We had just a great community.
But they took you to other games. Like you went to the Blackhawks and game with them. I mean, at times you would hear like a kid of a famous actor. Like I never saw my dad. He was constantly going somewhere. No, your dad was like there.
Oh, Glenn Becker lived at our house too. So Glenn and my dad, we lived on this lake. They built us a hockey rink. So we had professional hockey nets from the Hawks. We had the fire department come down and hose down the rink, and everyone from the neighborhood come out and play hockey. So and I gotta say, I'm glad we grew up that way. We wore normal that way. But at the same time, maybe my brother and I weren't as prepared for the real life because it was so comfortable and nice that you thought it was going to keep on going, right? And just a little bit to be more aware that we are living kind of a unique life. Now, if he was a movie star or something, maybe you would pop out of that. But because in the off season, my dad goes to work.
Yeah,
he's got a pizza place. He's working at an oil company.
So people explain this. People don't know that. The salaries were not what they were today. You'd have to have like a regular job.
Yep.
So explain. Tell me. Yeah. So what kind of pizza? Where did he work?
Well, he had Ron Santo Pizzeria that he formed with Gene Polano, who was a dear friend, and the family's a family who was a dear friend of ours, still is. We would. He had a pizza place. He would deliver his own pizzas at times. Going to.
Can you imagine?
That's part of our story, the blue collar family. That lifestyle where you don't imagine that anymore today. But back then, he's got this. He was the first one to put pizzas in Wrigley Field. That was his pizza. They didn't even sell pizzas at any ballpark, and my dad put them into Wrigley. I think in 1967. It was Pro's Pizza with my dad's face, and then he put every teammate he got involved in the promotion too. They had their faces on the boxes. So when you would go get a box, you'd either get Ernie Banks, Billy Williams, my dad, the whole team. Randy Hundley. So he was constantly working. I think of my dad, because there's different stages of my father. And the stage that I think of him with Blue Collar Famous is the stage when I was a kid. And his personality was larger than life. I just loved being around him. He just had this charisma, and he had fun, and he attacked things. And when he got upset, he let you know it. He was pretty much...
He was a man's man.
He was a transparent guy.
Yeah.
And you knew if he was upset, back off a little bit. But, if the Cubs won, my brother and I, it's like, how many Volkswagens can you count on the way home and you'll get a day off of school tomorrow? There we go. There's one, two. Here, me and my brother go. And then if they lose, we're like, how the hell can we get home without going in the car with him?
Dude, that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
If anybody ever listens to this man in the booth, that's exactly, you knew how he felt at all times.
Yeah.
But for yourself, like, did he ever help you with math? Like,
He tried.
Or was it more?
That
like
was more my
your
mom.
Yeah.
Well, my mom was a special lady too. Like they went to high school together.
Oh, so they knew each other very young.
She lived up on the hill, had money. My dad lived in the valley, so they would call those valley kids and the hill people.
So they met in Washington.
So yeah,
Seattle?
right in the city, Seattle. And so my dad was kind of like a greaser. My mom was a little bit of the part of the socias, the greases and the socias.
Yeah.
And so, my mom just like, she didn't put a leash on us. She gave us free reign. We go to Wrigley, we were on our own. See you later. She hardly went to the games. She didn't, she would watch them at home and sit there. Definitely during 69, she always had to watch on the TV. It was miserable at the end. But she just let everyone be who they were. And somehow we never got hurt. A couple times. Ernie Banks hit a line drive. I was shagging fly balls and broke my hand. That was one time that we got kicked off the field. But other than that, she was just, that's probably why we had such a normal life, because she made it normal for us.
Yeah. So it was really your mom who grounded things a little bit more?
Well, both of them, because he was grounded. He always appreciated the game. He never was one of those stuck-up guys that you would think that, he wasn't a Reggie Jackson. Now, and I'm not knocking Reggie, but that was just Reggie. I remember as a kid going, hey, the Oakland A's are in the other dugout, spring training. Let's go get Reggie's autograph. He's like, get out of here. All right. So Reggie's not too nice, but hell, he could hit. Yeah. But it was, my dad was just one of those players that just, someone came up to him, and it had a lot to do with the adversity he went through, starting with his dad, and then diabetes, and knowing that it could end any day. So he was one of those guys.
I mean, you see, especially in that doc, like the dude getting up every day, having to put on his legs, that kind of thing. It's a lot, and he dealt with a lot. I wanted to know also, when his career was over, obviously, he must have been waiting for that Hall of Fame call for obviously ever. Was that something you guys talked about, like the dinner table? Like he was just frustrated, or he was like, I don't really need it?
No.
He wanted it.
No, he wanted it.
It definitely, just so you know, on behalf of every Chicagoan, as you probably know, it was extremely depressing that it had to happen after the fact.
Yeah.
Nobody was happy about that. I'm happy that it happened.
Absolutely.
And the statue and the whole thing, but still. What did he talk to you about specifically at home? Was it like he would just be like, why are they calling?
Well, when he first was up for the Hall of Fame, you 5 years out of the league, and then you're eligible on the writers' ballot.
Right.
He didn't even get 5% to stay on the ballot. They had to do a revote and put him back on, which is depressing. And I think it had a lot to do with the Cubs not winning, obviously, right? And if you look at his stats, because Billy, Fergie, and Ernie
they were into the Hall of Fame pretty free.
Yeah, they got in. And my dad had to weather through that writers' how many years, 15, 20 years, whatever it was, and never get the 75%, right? And knowing that you're not even really getting close. I think the most he got was toward maybe 50, 49%. And if you look closely at my dad's stats of what he did, like literally...
you should tell everybody.
He had a better WAR than even, I think, Ernie. But what he did in the field and at the plate, he set all the records that Mike Schmidt broke. Like he set 7 years in a row, he held all the records for assists, for double plays, 9 for total chances. You look at his total chances, 550, 580. I mean, he was a beast. He got everything.
How many Gold Gloves?
5 Gold Gloves. Probably should have had more, but that's a vote, right?
Yeah.
It's not up to you, and so he got 5. But also, in the decade of the 60s, only 2 players had more RBIs than him: Henry Aaron and Willie Mays.
Oh, well, there you go.
Well, I mean, but so just in that category alone, right? He led the league in walks 4 seasons. You look at the guys today; they don't even have batting averages over 260. My dad, and their on-base percentages don't even hit 300. My dad was high 300s, twice over 400 on-base percentage. So you're walking the same amount of times as you're striking out.
Yeah, which is
a good ball player is what you should be, but they're not doing that anymore, right? So you just look at all those things, getting on base. He was a top Moneyball player. Like literally, when Moneyball started happening, Ron Santo would be at top of the list. Your third baseman.
How many years was he an All-Star?
He was an All-Star 9 seasons.
That's insane. Yeah. Just so you know, people nowadays, if they are an All-Star for 3 seasons, they're almost considered for the Hall of Fame, which is insane. But I agree with you. The Cubs' winning record has been the biggest hiccup to a lot of players getting the recognition. But definitely, he got the worst, unfortunately.
He got the worst because he spoke his mind, all right? So, like...
do you think the wrong, like, writers the wrong
Oh,
way?
absolutely.
I see.
And not so much the Chicago writers.
What a crappy... Just so you know, in general, I always wondered, like, even as a kid, why do writers make the decisions of why there's a Hall of Famer? I always thought it should be players that should be voting in other players, which I think...
is how I got in. Because it was a Veterans Committee, and it was the players of that committee that played in his era voted him in.
They had to wait until he died, which is crazy to me.
And it's New York. You know, you got a lot of writers from New York. So my dad hated the Mets, and he wasn't shy about that. But there was a lot going on. I think it had a lot to do, too, that the Don Young incident never really went away from my dad.
Can you explain that incident?
Do you know a little bit about that?
I don't know what that is.
In 1969, the Cubs came off of a great 1968 season. And you got to look at that team and go, okay, in 1969, my dad, Billy Williams, and Ernie Banks have played together for 9 seasons.
Was Fergie there too at that?
Fergie was there at 66. So you have a team that literally my dad, Billy, and Ernie have been wanting to win since Ernie before that on a losing team with the College of Coaches, finally now getting a core group of guys like Randy Huntley, Don Kessinger, Glenn Beckert, Fergie Jenkins, Kenny Holzman, Bill Hands. Those guys came in around 65, 66. So now in 69, you got a veteran team that are young.
Yeah.
My dad's 29. Ernie's the old...
Good hitter, good fielder.
Everything's solid. And they were right there in 68. And they got DeRocher at the helm, right? Who came in to take over that team, who was a, infamous, guy in the game. Famous guy, right? Hollywood guy. So... this is the year in 69. It was the first year, too, that they actually split the division because it was American National League up till then. And then now there's a division, 2 divisions to have a playoff game. So that's the years the Cubs got off to a great start. And the only position they were weak at was center field. So they were going to go with Adolfo Phillips, but he got hurt. And over the offseason, 68, Don Young had a cup of coffee in the bigs in 1965. He was actually in the starting lineup when Sandy Koufax pitched his perfect game against the Cubs, which is a great story that my dad always tells. And he had maybe like 10 at-bats, went down to the minors, then drifted away, went into the low minors, and then 1968 he was basically out of baseball, couch surfing in San Francisco. And the story I heard, it was been written, a lot of stories written on it, that he was looking for a job because he was dating, I think, an ex-biker's girlfriend, and he was nervous and found out that the Cubs needed a center fielder, so he called John Holland up himself and said, "Hey, listen, I still think I got it." Is this time? Right? You got a great team, and so Holland's like, "All right, come out to spring training." So he comes out to spring training and he impresses. Like this guy could run down a ball from in the gaps. He was a hell of a center fielder. Okay, arm. And DeRocher goes, "I like him. We're going to go with him." So he had my dad. He goes, my dad was the captain. Said, "Can you take this kid under your wing?" Right. Because he doesn't hit too well and he gets frustrated when he doesn't hit. But we don't need him to hit. We just need him to catch those balls in center field. Right. And so my dad just help him out with some hitting tips. Watch over him, get him ready because he, this is our year, and I don't want him to freak out. And so my dad took him under his wing and really became his mentor. And then somewhere around June, he started really struggling at the plate, and he was taking his hitting out into the field. A couple of times, my dad would calm down, whole thing. Well, they go to New York, and I think they're up 4.5 games. This was July 8th. And Fergie's pitching a gem, and they're winning 3-1 in the 9th inning. And Don Young had a tough game at the plate. And he dropped 2 fly balls in the 9th inning that cost the game. They came back and won. The Mets did. One was he misjudged the ball coming in, and then it was a tough catch he had to try and make in the alley. But Fergie would always move the players, and he was telling them to move. DeRocher even came out and said, he's not moving for me. And he even told like Jim Hickman, Jim Hickman told him to move over, and he just told him to F off. And then so Hickman went into the dugout and said, Ron, the kid's kind of talking back out there. So my dad took him in the corner. Hey, man, you got to get it together, blah, blah, blah. Just didn't listen and had a tough ninth inning. And then after the game, they were all really upset. DeRocher was pissed. And all the reporters came in, and DeRocher yells out and says, my 2-year-old could have caught those balls. So Don Young, before that, though, Don Young was in his uniform, wanted to leave the clubhouse in his uniform. My dad stopped him at the door, said, get back, undress like the rest of us. Okay, it's game. And DeRocher said that. The kid took off his uniform and just darted out of the clubhouse. Now, my dad had a good relationship with this kid. And my dad was upset because the way the kid was acting, had like a quitter's mentality. He liked him. And DeRocher said what he said. It was DeRocher that made him go out, and DeRocher said some awful things about that. Those guys said that stuff back then, man. That's how it went.
They did not hold.
No.
At the time, coaches definitely had a little bit more on the power side. Now players have all the same.
All of it. And
it's just sad.
It kind of is, and that's just, but for people to hear that. So my dad was always one of the last ones to leave the clubhouse. And so he took a shower last, came and had a beer, and then a couple of the riders went over by him, and he wound up, saying that, the kid's down, and said something to the fact that, he let his back get the best of him. My dad was being honest, and it's the truth. He goes, it's happened to me, but, he said something to the point of like, for all I could keep walking. He was pissed. And they wrote the next day in the papers, wrote, Ron Santo says Don Young blows game.
Oh,
and so that was the first time my dad got booed at Wrigley Field because they took it wrong. My mom went to New York on that trip, and so did a couple of friends. He got a call at 4 a.m. and answered the phone in New York. They're like, so what do you say about the headline? He's like, what are you talking about? That you say the kid, what do you? So he had no idea what's going on. So he went over to Don Young's room and was like, Don, I didn't. And Young was being different, and so he apologized to the kid, which he didn't even want to apologize because he didn't feel like he said anything wrong. He was just voicing what happened out there. And it took it to a place where it escalated into hate mail, and then we had a 1.5-year death threat on us. We had 24-hour protection. I would have
from who, fans?
The whole from this death threat letter that would come every Tuesday. It was FBI got involved, so it lasted in our life for about 1.5 years. But that situation escalated to where the Cubs wound up losing, and a lot of people blamed it on that game.
Oh man!
And it's all so and so that's one of the things we feature in this series is that's kind of like the epicenter of where my dad's character got challenged, and it was the wrong way. It was kind of like how news today, you can just and it's like that wasn't
no.
Oh yeah, totally. But it relates. The story relates to a point of like where someone's character is assassinated to a point where it didn't go down that way, and you're fighting it. Where my dad was all about the team. You ask any guy, he would be the first guy to jump on a team member. He'd be the first guy to congratulate. He was the guy that mentored Don Young. So both of those guys, my dad and Don Young, kind of got thrown under the bus on that one. Both of them, Don never played after that. Again, my dad took that Don Young game in the '69 season. I think he thought about that the day till he died.
Well, it was a good squad.
It was a great squad, and he loved that team and everybody on that team. So just that part of it is a point where, and our family had for 1.5 years. I remember as a kid, I would run from cars because I thought I was going to be kidnapped.
Oh my God!
So the thing got so out of hand. But that's what happens kind of in back then. A lot of people don't know the depth of it because, today everyone would know what was going on.
They didn't want to go take a piss.
Yeah. But it was cool. So there's a lot of things that my dad wanted to win so bad because, a lot of those guys don't realize, like, I talked to Randy Hungley about this. My dad was a city boy. He was a country boy. But my dad, there's a difference. When you grow up in that city, there's a toughness. He grew up in a city where his high school, half black. He was right in the thick of it, and, his life could have went the other way on the streets if it wasn't for his mom or his sister that kept him off. The baseball kept him off the streets. Mm-hmm. My dad was a tough kid.
What's funny about this, you were saying the school's half black thing. I remember hearing about this. Him and racial lines, and at that time it was a big, it was not that far after, Jackie Robinson and everything. he was always cool with all players.
All of them.
He was like, there was no issues with him at all on the racial lines, which was pretty cool. Again, I remember him saying, so I remember reading something that he was like, one of the reasons he really wanted to go to the Cubs, you remember Ernie Banks? He was like,
That's it.
I want to play with that dude.
Yep. And Wrigley and even Billy, man, he saw the discrimination down in Double A when Billy Williams. My dad fought like, why can't he eat where we're eating? Right.
Yeah.
My dad grew up in the Northwest, so he had
it wasn't the South.
Yeah, he's not in the South, right? So it's much different. But he went to play minor league ball down in the South.
Yeah, so
so my dad was just there was a lot that on that team. There was a time where they had Kenny Hubbs. I don't know if you knew about Kenny Hubbs. Rookie of the year in 1962 for the Cubs. Got killed in a private plane crash.
Oh wow!
Scared to fly and wanted to learn how to fly, and then wound up getting killed in a plane that he flew in Utah. And that was one of my dad's best friends. And you got to think, Billy Williams was Rookie of the Year in 1961. Kenny Hubbs was Rookie of the Year in 1962. My dad would have been Rookie of the Year in 1960, but came up halfway in the season. Right. Had enough at bats to be rookie, but didn't have a full season. Think of 3 Rookies of the Year on that team. They were ready to be an all-star, the blue machine, like the red, the Cincinnati Red machine. And Hubbs died. And so that's a powerful moment in our series too, because that destroyed the club. I mean, literally, we're like, my dad had to go see a priest about that, and they were so close. And then Beckert came along, and my dad didn't even want to talk to Beckert because he's like, I don't want to talk to another second base. And those guys became best friends.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And roommates on the road. So there's just so much, like, I don't know, what do you want to call it, destiny or fate? And my dad's life just seemed be a lot of adversity, but he plowed through it. And psychologically, it's helped me in my life at this age to really explore what he really went through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool about the series. So is that already planned out, or is it still?
Well, we've got it. We've been working on it for a long time, and now that Bonnie's on, we're taking it to the next level. So we'll hopefully be pitching that soon with a pilot that we're going to finish up, and hopefully that's something that will be out there in the next couple of years, because it's a powerful series and it's a powerful time. That's awesome. Never going to be around anymore.
Yeah, I know.
That's when baseball, I think, was at the height. You think of that golden era. You look at the 1969 starting lineup on both sides, all Hall of Fame. Look at the lineup. Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, Johnny Bench, Ron Santo. Just go. I mean, Henry Aaron.
Yeah,
it's insane.
This is before steroids.
Roberto Clemente. You keep going. I mean, it's just crazy. So,
did your dad ever want to manage?
He thought about that, but then he went into business. There was a period of time there before he became a broadcaster that I feel that those were tough times for him because he was away from the game.
Yeah,
and the game meant everything to him.
Being a broadcaster, that was a good decision.
It was. It's
him and Pat Hughes literally made my child. You know what I mean?
Mark, he talks about that. That put years on his life, being back in the baseball and being the voice, to being the fan in the booth. You could tell, listen to the radio if the Cubs were winning or losing.
Yeah.
Just the tone of his voice.
It was like, I just remember one of my favorite calls. I think it was a really bad year. Brant Brown drops a ball.
98.
He drops it from looking in the sun. And I just remember hearing, oh! But that one groan, I was like, man, that's how we all felt.
Yeah.
That was, and that's why, man, the 2016, dude, all I could say is, I wish we could have a lot more of those, but I was born in 85, so my favorite ball player growing up was Mark Grace. Like,
there you go.
It was a much later time, but of course I learned about all the former greats, of course, and I wish I could have seen. My very first job ever was working at Wrigley, like official job, not babies.
Wow, what'd you do?
I sold pop.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
Behind the concession stand, or
no? I was up in the stands.
Oh wow! All right.
Yeah, it was actually it was maybe a mistake, and I'll tell you why. It was like, okay, so I was like a camp counselor. I did all that stuff during the summer, but I was 16. I could finally sell, and my first game was a doubleheader against the Cardinals, and it was like standing room only.
Oh wow!
I was 16. I was in shape, but dude, I was in so much pain because those trays were heavy. And I'm thinking, I'm at Wrigley. Like, this would be like a dream. I didn't get to watch the game. Like, I was hustling, right? And it was like, and I was in pain running up and down stairs, and people, drunk people by the end of this. It was rough. the only time I could stop, and I've told this before on this show, is when Sammy Sosa hit. When Sammy was hitting, no one was buying anything. So I would literally be able to watch him, usually club a homer, and then I go back to work. So I've had connections, and I've worked a little bit. I worked at the convention before. It was one of my first video gigs coming out during college. Anyway,
lugging those Coke things and the beer thing. That is tough, man. Was it hot out?
Dude,
yeah,
it was July.
There you go. The humidity was that's
rough.
brutal.
And like school ended, and I was like working. I probably lasted, no joke, only a few weeks, and I was just, I can't do it. I couldn't do it anymore because it wasn't enjoyable.
Yeah.
You make some money, but it was like,
right.
Yeah. And never do a doubleheader to start your entire career as a vendor. Cubs, I think they still bring people back to do something stretch and stuff like that. Did you ever get to do that?
We did it when my dad passed, but they've never asked after that. Which I don't know why, but anyway,
maybe after when you do the series.
Actually,
you should contact them.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to contact. I mean, they can easily contact me. I'm not going to, but it's just
it's good PR.
Yeah, but the thing is, I do. They did have when the Cubs would come here, the Ricketts would get a booth with, all the actors out here and producers, and so. I would go to that a couple of times and see Joe and Bonnie and all them. So that's nice. But I haven't been back to Chicago that often. But when I go back there, it's seen a lot of. I haven't that often. Since COVID, it hasn't happened. It's weird. Since my dad passed, and he's at Wrigley Field.
Is your mom still around, by the way?
Yeah, everyone lives in Arizona now.
Oh,
so
okay,
my family's not there.
In Arizona, I know that.
Yeah, and so. They didn't know this for a while, but someone let it out. So I can say this now. But we dumped his ashes at third base, and
they said that. That's written.
Yeah. But we couldn't say it for a while, so I really didn't talk about it much. I think I mentioned something on my podcast once, but so he's there, and the statue's there. So it's great when I go back, and then just I have a place to go to just kind of look at what he, the statue and everything.
You spoke at his statue.
I did. And it's weird. It's just one of those things where my home is out here now, as you know, in this business, you got to work and keep working to work, right?
No, it's
so you're always hustling. But I love going back to Chicago when I do. I got a lot of friends there that, you reunite with. So it's usually a lot of that, so it's not much different than probably you going back.
Okay. But it's funny. I go back twice a year.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I go usually July, August, and then we'll go in like December around the holidays.
Oh, that December one's a tough one.
It is it is a tough one. We do it with the family.
You got the family out there, so I understand.
We are on an island over here.
Oh, that's great.
We are
okay.
It's great and not so great. My closest friends are still back there, and so we see them only a couple of times a year, which is kind of rough. But
that's great.
You had to do what you had to do.
Yeah.
So I wanted to hear. So you played baseball.
I did.
When did you say, I want to go be a filmmaker?
Well, I did a lot of that stuff when I was younger. I loved one of the first guys to have like a Super 8 camera, and then I had the first video cameras. So my friends and we always did kooky stuff.
Somebody else started.
And I had a love for it. I had a love for movies. And when the dream of baseball ended, I didn't know it was going to end. When it did, kind of just came upon me. And then I felt the depression there. And I was fortunate. I was down at Wrigley Field. I was working at Randy Hundley's fantasy camp at Wrigley. And John Cusack was down there. And he just got the part for 8 Men Out, playing Buck Weaver.
Nice.
And he needed some instructions with base because he never really played baseball before. And so I said, yeah, man, I could help you out. So I started working with him. And then I got my dad to come out to a field, Duke Childs, that we would play at, and started working with him. And I formed a pretty cool friendship with John. And then John got me a part on the movie. I hit and do a double play for the...
I got to watch that.
Yeah, I'm literally right in the beginning. I hit and do a double play. You see me. It's quick, but I think I did it in 2 takes, hit at the second base. And John Sayles was the director and very, just a renowned independent filmmaker, director, and it was a pleasure meeting him. And I got to get a copy of the script, and right from that time, that experience I had on that set, I'm like, I want to try this.
So what year did you move out here?
Well, I learned the craft. First of all, I just stayed down, put my head down, and just got a lot of books and just started looking at scripts and writing. And then I did a play with my friend Dan Foley in Chicago called The 25th Man. It's about the last guy on the bench who's suffering, had a couple of great seasons, but now he has vertigo. And, he's kind of one of those guys that's cheerleading the team, but...
Did you do Goodman?
We did it at the Halstead Theater.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, right there on Halstead and Diversey, and it was great. It did well, and it was my first thing I got into, and then from there, I was going to take the play to Arizona, and then the theater fell through, and I wound up writing another play called Roughing a Diamond about 3 ex-ball players who show up to the first fantasy camp, kind of like a Waiting for Godot, as they wait for these campers, and there's this relationship between the 3 guys. And there's an adverse one between the guy like I portrayed over my father and a guy like Joe Pepitone. And they're all like, why are these guys coming out to play with us? We didn't win anything. So it just took place in this old clubhouse as they're waiting for the campers to arrive. And that did really well. And Joe Mantegna, I sent it to him out here. It played at the Scottsdale Theater for Performing Arts and did really well. And Joe's like, I like this play. Why don't you come out here? We'll do a reading for it at the Cannon Theater. And I did, and got along with Joe. He's like, hey, man, you got some talent here as a writer. Why don't you come out to Hollywood? That you got to get out here. And so I packed up my truck, and I went out to Hollywood.
What year was this?
That was 1994.
Wow.
Yeah, and then Joe wound up, him and Dennis Franz did a taping of it for national radio, and you can get the taping of my play, A Rough and a Diamond, on iTunes.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, so that's how I started.
That's so fun, but that circle right there, your NYPD Blue Boy and Joe Mantegna,
right?
You were in that.
Yeah, and Joe, I give that to Joe. Joe really,
that's pretty cool.
Joe wrote me a handwritten letter when I wrote him. I'm like, is he even going to read this? I was like stunned when I got it back. He literally just hand wrote, "Hey Jeff, really like this script."
And
that's
I'm
nice. Yeah, and we've been great friends ever since. And then he was the narrator on This Old Cup.
That's of course.
And Joe got all those guys to be involved. He got Bill
Murray was in
there. And then and all of them. Go down the line. Dennis Franz, Gary Sinise.
Yep.
The comedian Tom Dreesen, and Dennis Farina.
Yeah.
All of them.
Who
it was great. So they took kind of the perspective of the fan, which is really cool to see before all of them became famous.
That is
right.
That is really cool.
So that was neat.
And then, so I know you've done a couple independent films out here, and I've seen clips, and I haven't seen anything full. I've seen because I had to read. I was like, what has he done? You've worked with some cool people. You've done a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So right now, the series seems like it's the number one priority on what you're trying to make. Are you doing any other things?
Yeah, an independent film too is a priority. We just did it. My wife and I. My wife is a writer and director, and we've been collaborating for the last 15 years. We wrote a book together. We're really into noir. We like that kind of style. And we're also doing an independent film. We just did a sizzle reel for it, shot 6 pages of it, and it's really cool about a aging motorcycle club legend on one final ride to try and save his club, and meets a touring burlesque performer who rides her motorcycle down south and a real person does this. And so it's a really cool independent film, road movie, that deals with the snakes on the road of life that you got to watch out for, and about existentialism. He's dying, and dealing with when your time's to go, what do you want to leave behind? And there's a really endearing relationship between him and this burlesque dancer who's 50 years younger, so it's like a grandfather-granddaughter relationship.
That's really cool.
And it's really, so when he dies, she's kind of like reborn to understand the wisdom that he just gave to her about what to watch out for. If you're alone on the road here, be careful.
What's this called?
It's called Wild Ones.
Wild Ones.
Yeah, so we're going to shoot that in the spring, and then the series is those two are my top things that I am committed to getting those done, because they're worthy, and we have a really good vision for both of them.
And the podcast, obviously.
Yeah, podcast is going to stay with us all the way. I'm going to take people through all these journeys. So I'm going to take them in the blue collar famous. I'm going to take them into the wild ones.
That's awesome. Yeah. Anything else you want to promote? Anything else you want to tell us about?
Just go to Peanuts, Popcorn, and Crackerjacks. We got a lot of good interviews there. And like you said, Tommy John is a great one I did. Like I said, Bonnie Hunt, Joe Mantegna.
Yeah, I listened to that Chelios one. I was actually
Chris Chelios,
That was a pretty cool one.
What a great story. I mean, there's so many. I like to, Mark, stories are everything, man. Stories are what make you go forward, that inspire.
Fabric of our
It
society.
really is, and you got to connect those stories in your life, man. And I believe that, you know, I just love hearing people's stories, and I love connecting with my childhood, the kid that I once was, and because a lot of us, man, I feel like the older you get, I'm at 60, you got to tap into that kid when you had the balls to do a lot of stuff, right? And you just didn't care about much. And I remember that kid, and not that I lost anything, but there was a time there that I did, that I just love connecting back with that. And the people who were around me at that time, I get to hear their stories of what they thought about hanging around our family, my dad, and what that was like. So it's a great world that I love diving back into, because it just helps me move forward in my world today.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome. I feel just so you know, an hour flew by like that. It was like nothing, dude. Congratulations.
Awesome,
Thank you so
Mark.
much. And
Great being on.
We're
Yeah,
gonna hang out.
we have
We're
to
gonna
hang out. Man.
We'll
No doubt about it. We got to watch some.
We gotta watch
We got to meet over at Gino's, you know. 100%. So absolutely, man.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.